So as promised, the little extra game here for fun, since both of us had time for one more before dinner. So good opening hand again. Mustache and Sorlet to answer stuff. Foamy as a good, I end up having to go first here, but Foamy as a phenomenal, just generic turn one play. If my opponent tries to attack over it, I can easily flow into something else. P-Gust here to start answering runes. Scythe if I need to attack over stuff. And my opponent ends up playing her own Foamy. I think that's what really was Poison Tip Arrows the P-Gust here as well. So a bit unfortunate, but again, P-Gust really showing like it doing what it needs to do, and that's forcing my opponent to either activate their counter runes or destroy them itself, and it still forced two spirits out, so not bad. Can't really attack over the Foamy, so just leave it in defense. So a bit of a Foamy stall here. Really, what I was noticing from this game is that I felt really good about being able to win these games with my strategy, as my opponent really wasn't, and feeling confident I could transition pretty easily into my beatdown strategy because there wasn't. I did notice that JyGein really wasn't reacting too much to my board. So here she does actually have that reaction in Sorlet being able to attack over my Foamy, but again, I can just flow into another Foamy. Earthquake will actually help me catch up here, especially since I'm lacking my counter runes here. And Scythe here with there's no sets, so yeah. I choose to Earthquake the Foamy to not allow JyGein the value that she needs. I switch Foamy to attack because I am going to enchant, pretty much play my Sorlet. I ended up choosing to equip Scythe instead of using Sorlet's ability because I can recur one Earth Spirit, meaning it would have been expending Wind Spirit versus expending Earth Spirit, and I would like to keep that one for the Peliquarius if necessary. So Tornado punishes the Scythe here. Scythe really not feeling as great as I'd hoped, but at the same time it did what it needed to. It netted me back a Spirit, so essentially cost one, and it let me save a Wind Spirit. So a bit of more flexible play, probably one of the better use cases that I could expect from Scythe. So playing the Peliquarius, searching out, let's see, the Aphros, again, just trying to draw more cards. And this is kind of the scenarios I was feeling Aphros wasn't that great, was drawing cards is great, but if you don't really have control on the board, what are you doing with that? Especially against my deck who wants to get control of the board and really maximize on that, it definitely feels like a bit of a slower play. And that's actually, I did discuss this in my deck preview, and I'm going to discuss this more in the deck recap. That just kind of this feeling of, it's a great turn one play, but once the game gets going, can you really afford to use it unless it's like in the late game or something? So I'll get to more on that. Anyway, I'm able to attack over the Peliquarius, obviously. Enchant my own Peliquarius, search out a Tadpuff, so I have an easy way to get up into Capricorn if need be, especially with the Foamy in my discard. My opponent Ambrosia's. Again, seeing those Ambrosias, haven't seen mine at all since game one. So special enchants Tadpuff, ascends into, or doesn't ascend, normal enchants Aphros to then Nexus the Spirit from Tadpuff to draw the two. And here, I was saying for the Capricorn, but I realized with three cards on board, Capricorn really isn't doing, or the Tadpuff plus Capricorn combo won't do anything, as I don't have the board space for it. I can ascend Foamy into Capricorn and then attack over and get the Foamy, but the set card, I just misenchant a P-Gust here. I didn't have any wind left because of the Peliquarius, figuring that I have such a commanding board space, the pop I don't really need. So I just start trying to attack, and then I didn't realize this at the time. So uh, actually ascending Foamy into Capricorn might have not been a bad idea here. Was that I didn't have a way to I only had Sorlet to attack over Afro, so I really should have set up two. And here's another interesting play. She's able to get another Afros out and start nexusing between the two to essentially draw four, which is a very interesting play, especially knowing that with all my cards being two attack, that I'm going to have a bit of trouble getting over these. Even with Scythe, it doesn't actually hit over these. So I'm going to have to set up two attackers to get over these, which puts me in an interesting place. So, and here it just lets her accumulate cards while stalling out to draw into her own answers. So here, Afros definitely feels a lot better than I was really giving it credit for earlier on. But it's just one of those things where you need to be careful when you use Afros, I think, and make sure that drawing cards is really your best option there if you can afford to. So here, just re-bring out the Sorlet, misenchant it, no need to get its effect. I'm trying to remember if I used Sorlet's ability when I first enchanted it. I think I did properly enchant it thinking I would use it, But honestly, I should have misenchanted from the beginning if I wasn't planning on using its effect. Oh no, I know why. Because I was thinking I should properly enchant just in case I need to use its effect, because I hadn't played Pelicoreus yet. But anyway, so knowing the others can't attack, I switch into defense because they're more likely to just survive in defense. But ends up misenchanting the Aeolus to Nexus to draw 2 more. Draws that third Ambrosia again. I'm just like, JyGein was seeing all the Ambrosias to help her survive while I was seeing none of them, so kind of crazy here. But properly enchants another Aeolus here to start searching out her pieces. Actually, nope, doesn't need to. Just gonna go Exaltair and Nexus to force me to expend 2 spirits, as that is her best way to start it, kind of chipping over the top of my commanding board, which isn't a bad strategy. It worked for her in game 2, but having seen this before, I know I really need to get control of this board, and actually, I Sorlet can just attack over Exaltair, so I really think JyGein was hoping to start chipping away with multiple Exaltair, so I end up switching both these to attack, realizing I can start attacking over stuff. Normal Ascendant to the capital, don't really need the Tad buff climbing to help climb. Definitely one of those things I'm considering is like my Tad Puff numbers, because yet again, didn't need Tad Puff here. Tack over to get, oh yeah, I think I tacked over with the capital thinking it could expend some, forgetting that Exaltair had 2 spirits, but order didn't matter here. Just mattered that I got the foamy, was able to expend 2 more spirits here. So my JyGein did have the other Exaltair to force me to expend 2, so I'm down to 4 spirits now. And I'm debating, do I need Scythe? And I ultimately decide, no, I do not. I technically could have started recurring with Scythe, but I think the Water Spirits were more valuable with the Foamy on board, with the Mustachian in hand, just to kind of... I think I had more benefit from keeping the Water Spirits than trying to equip Scythe, as I think my other plays were safer and less of a, I guess, high roll per se. And here I end up choosing to use all the spirits because by special enchanting Tadpuff and ascending into my Mustachian here, what it essentially allowed me to do was just knock out the rest of her spirits. So she ends up showing her hand. Didn't play any runes, so some of those cards were useless, and also nothing to really proactively answer my board since I got ahead. So again, just my deck, all 3 games worked as intended. The second game, I just didn't transition to Beatdown soon enough to close out the game, allow my opponent to attack over it. But all in all, really happy with how the deck performed here. I'm going to leave the post discussion, or more details to the post discussion. Just kind of added on my thoughts watching back through was my main goal here. So look forward to the post discussion starting now. As evident by the 6 games I played, the changes I made to my deck I really think did wonders. Winning 5 of those games, and the only one I won was because my opponent was able to go over the top and force me to expend 2 spirits with Exaltair, I think really shows promise for this deck. And really that one game where I lost to Exaltair, it really got drawn out too long, and my opponent seeing her Ambrosias while I didn't see any of mine really just sealed the deal for that kind of gameplay. Nothing I'm really considering changing up much of the deck about because of that game, but it's something that, if it keeps happening, maybe should look into how I can better deal with that. But with that being said, I'm really happy with adding P-Gust. I thought it was a phenomenal include and did exactly what I wanted to do, be able to disrupt my opponent's runes before I can then really focus on controlling the board with the Elestrals. So P-Gust I really feel like was the MVP in those matches from my testing. Mustachian and Sorlet were also really phenomenal cards at controlling the board with their high attack stats, and Mustachian being able to freely flip it during both players' turns, and also a great call of a Foamy. I really felt like these cards were putting the work to help me secure the board with my control focus, and also not too bad when switching over to a beatdown style to make sure I can continue to have control of the board and answer whatever my opponent still is able to play. I even feel like Pelicoreus here did what it needed to. It was just a nice neutral play. I was able to, I believe in one game, add a Tadpuff to my hand to set up my Ascension play. So when I had control of the board, it was a nice 1 Spirit Celestial to set up into stronger stuff if need be. So I've so far 2 copies I'm really happy with. Another card I was happy at 2 copies is Earthquake. I feel like I saw it enough where I was able to answer my opponent's stuff when necessary to get control of the board, and really wasn't seeing it when it wasn't necessary. So far, Earthquake at 2, I'm really happy with that choice I made as well. Getting into some cards I thought underperformed was really Scythe here. In a lot of those games, I was just holding it and very wary to play it just because I didn't want the thing I equipped it to get destroyed, and a lot of times I didn't need that extra attack, so why expend the 2 spirits if necessary? Demeter definitely felt better in those scenarios, because pretty much what was happening was either I was wanting to bait stuff out with P-Gust, or I had other cheaper answers such as just a Sorlet or Mustachian. So all in all, Scythe, really one of those cards that I'm wondering if I maybe want to cut down. I don't think I cut it completely out because I could see in other matchups this card being way more useful than the matchup I was playing against. I mean, I was playing my opponent was playing Water Wind, meaning their stats were very similar to mine as well. But I guess the final point with Scythe I noticed was just if I hadn't already played like an Earthquake or a Nectar of the Gods to get an Earth Spirit into the Underworld, I was even more hesitant to play it because I wasn't able to recur some stuff and get some additional value. So just a little note, I really think that that is one that maybe at most I want to cut down to 2 copies and see how it works, but I really think I need to try out against the rest of the meta to really determine to see if it truly isn't as useful as I think it is, or if it was just that matchup. I'm also starting to think that maybe running 3/3 each of Capricorn and Globby just isn't necessary. Because I was even hesitant to go into these sometimes, because a lot of times my 1 cost Celestials were just putting in the work. If I had control on the board, usually Sora and Mustachian could deal with whatever my opponent could bring out, and I really didn't need the extra attack on Capricorn or Globby. And on top of that, a lot of times if I had control over the board and if my opponent was struggling to respond to it, or even if my opponent was responding to it, sometimes it was just easier to play out another 1 spirit than go up into Capricorn. Either I didn't have the space or I could easily fill it up again anyway. So definitely a little note there. Kind of same thing with Globby here as well, is even though it was nice just to set up, it's one of those, I think, high risk, high reward cards as you're pulling a lot of spirits out that your opponent can interact with. That being said, though, it was definitely nice when I did see it, and it set up a good offensive pressure, just making it, especially spraying spirits across multiple targets, just made it hard for my opponent to effectively get off my high damage output or high spirit expansion output each turn. So um, I guess really what I've noticed here is maybe I don't need them at 3, maybe two, especially like 2 Globby, maybe a 2/2 split of them. I'll be able to see them enough. That comes with more testing. And also some changes to my deck, as I'll kind of get into one of the big things I notice about my deck once I'm done talking about the individual cards. Quick note following up Scythe and my 2 Spirit Elestrals, or mainly Capricorn, is with my removal or my counter runes, it was a lot easier to get control of the board, but sometimes that just meant there was no Elestrals out on my opponent's board to take advantage of Scythe and Capricorn with. So that's just kind of another thought, is that you could call it counter or yeah anti-synergy between the two, but at the same time, like Shield and Poison Tip Arrow definitely fulfill the first part of my game plan, controlling the board, and maybe it just means I'm not as reliant on these really Scythe or Capricorn or even Globby to really start to initiate that beatdown. Maybe it's just effective enough to go wide on the board and save these for if I really need to attack over something, if my opponent has some play they can make. My final notes on individual cards in my deck is sad I didn't get to see any Ambrosia, so I really didn't get to feel how strong the card is. So definitely more testing to see how I feel about this. What can I say? I just didn't see it. And as for Nectar of the Gods, I'm really feeling like turn 1, love seeing this card. Real easy play, gets me an Earth Spirit in my Underworld to start taking advantage of Scythe, gets me 2 extra cards for more options to begin with. Feels really good. But when I start seeing it later in the game, I really didn't want to use it. And that's kind of a lot of discussion I've seen coming from other content creators such as Wirtz and just people in the Elestrals Discord in general, that really Nectar of the Gods doesn't feel great in the late game. So it ends up being a dead card. So this is another one I'm just like, is it really worth running, or can I run something a bit better that works, synergizes more with the deck? And that's kind of what I'm going to get into with the cards I'm considering running and some also sideboard discussion. But also, a big thing I noticed about my deck is that I was seeing the cards I needed to help me win. But at the same time, I knew if I was in a pinch, I really didn't have reliable draw power to see more cards or substantially more without giving up any sort of enchantment. And I don't think Nectar of the Gods is the best way to do it. So definitely something I might be looking to adjust ratios to address and run some more draw packages. So with that note, let's actually get into the cards that I had not run in deck that I do want to discuss in this post discussion. So getting the easy cards out of the way, Tsunami, definitely going the side deck. I could see this as a phenomenal counter rune against non-water decks if I know my opponent isn't running them. just to be able to stop their attacks. It'll help me gain board control easily, and it's technically cheaper than both shield and poison tip arrow at full power. So, and also allows me to spawn with stuff like scythe, maybe making it more worth it, or even being able to utilize Capricorn a bit early. Though that being said, that also relies on them having no counter runes, as I really don't want to use scythe and Capricorn against counter runes. That really punishes me. But still, definitely, definite inclusion in the side deck. In the same vein, Veritaqua, again, I think I didn't miss it in this deck, but as a side deck card, I think this will be phenomenal if I'm going up against a lot of decks that maybe can more easily buff their defense, or I notice that maybe as is, I can't easily deal with high defense cards with my buff cards. So Veritaqua, definitely another good sideboard card if I feel like I need that extra oomph against defense for one spirit, as sometimes getting these two spirits won't be as applicable, though I don't really see it being too much of an issue. Most of my games, once I have board control, I could choose to send up at any time. But that being said, that's why Veritalk was a sideboard card, not a main deck. Same thing with Tornado. I feel like Tornado is. I kind of talked about why I didn't include it in this deck, and I definitely think that was the right choice. P-Gust does what it needs to. But after playing these games and seeing Tornado be able to bounce back, it I should back up. Tornado, I was using it wrong. It is the value from this card definitely comes from being able to bounce back artifacts, your divine Elestrals, and the stadiums as well. So the reason I think it's a good sideboard card is if I know my opponent is playing a heavy count of those three types of runes, and that way I can punish it a bit better while still being able to pop stuff with P-Gust. So Tornado, again, I think is a phenomenal sideboard card. These next two I really want to discuss. As I alluded to in the deck overview before the gameplay videos, these I said I had more to say about this card after testing them, and I really do. So I kind of saw the power of these two cards in the match and the extra game against JyGein, and they definitely provided some great draw power. That being said, though, I think the issue in that matchup was because I had control of the board, she really didn't have ways to then get control of the board back for me despite having the card advantage in hand. So I'm wondering if I can use this in my deck to great effect as a better draw engine than Nectar of the Gods I can definitely use in the late game, as being able to move around water spirits also lends more into the beatdown strategy that this deck can go for. The other reason I'm considering running this in my main deck is because it's a phenomenal turn one play if you're going first. As most of my deck is reactive, the only cards that I'm really fine with playing out is like a Foamy, Mustachian Defense, Peliquarius is a good card, but other than that, I really don't have a lot of these cards are very reactive, so therefore I don't really want to play them. But having access to a draw two that instead of forcing me to lose two spirits, just means I have to move spirits around on board, meaning they're still out there to play with. It it seemed really good when I was playing against JyGein. So, and even the one issue I was thinking about at first was I need to see these two cards in my open hand. But frankly, that's not true. I can easily misenchant a Demeter, or if I really feel like making that play, I can misenchant the Scythe. So there's definitely ways I can proc this draw too, and I actually think that it really does cover a weakness of my deck, and that was really lacking card draw or effective card draw out of Globby. And Globby did feel good when I was using it, but just being able to dig two cards deeper as opposed to one with just spirits on board, I think will really help this deck be able to dig deeper and actually find those Ambrosias I was missing, or really make sure I have those answers in the late game so once I get control, I don't actually lose it. So these two cards are actually ones I'm really thinking of running in my main deck, and even if for whatever reason I come up with, I don't run them in my main deck, I think these two are definitely sideboard card, especially if I know that I'm probably going to have to go first in the next game. So definitely two cards that at first I was looking down upon that I'm now reconsidering now as I try to round out my deck. The final card I'm considering solely for my sideboard is Exaltair. And that's because it's kind of a nice way to go over the top or even just close out games a bit sooner. And I could definitely see this being nice to have in a side deck if I'm against a deck that's really aggressive and I find that my beatdown strategy just isn't getting me there fast enough. If my opponent's able to hit over the top and attack my spirit deck a bit more than I would like to give me the time to beat them down. So Exalter could really help answer that, as while I don't have many ways to get Wind Spirit, well, I don't really. The only ways I would have to get Wind Spirits are misenchanting my Divine Elestrals or a Scythe right now, and if I include Poseidon misenchanting that, uh, honestly, I don't even think it's a bad thing to maybe throw down Exalter when I have a Wind Spirit enchanted P-Gus, Peliquarius, or Sorlet, because just by Nexusing one off them, Exalter is at 2 spirits, meaning that you're really not losing out on the spirit advantage on board, as when you attack over something, having 2 with 1 or 1 with 2, as long as their attack doesn't make much of a difference. And even even though you lose out on Elestral, if really my idea is to use Exalter to win the game, therefore the having numbers advantage with your number of Elestrals doesn't even matter. So really you're just moving around spirits to force your opponent to expend 2 spirits, meaning that they're just that much closer to game. So fun little sideboard card. I don't know how much it'll come up, but I think it's a fun consideration to definitely see if it ever comes up. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed all the videos of me testing out this deck. I'll definitely probably upload some more gameplay of this deck, just playing it, but I don't know if I'll really do as deep of a dive unless I do a full-on deck profile later, as I really feel like this deck's nearing completion, and I think it'll be more interesting to move on to a different deck for YouTube content. Regardless though, I'd love to hear your all's thoughts on my analysis of this deck. If there's any changes you would really recommend, what are your thoughts on the changes that I kind of briefly suggested going over the cards I'm considering running? All that I'd love to know. I love the discussion down in the comments and also on the Discord server. With that being said though, look forward to the next deck I'm going to try to build.